Welcome to another episode of the Filipino Genealogy channel. Today, as we celebrate with our Muslim brothers and sisters the feast of Eid al-Adha and commemorate the willingness of Abraham to sacrifice his son as a sign of obedience to God's command, let us explore the family tree of the Sultans of Maguindanao. For this discussion, we will use the Mindanao Sultanates and allied royal houses family tree, which was designed by my good friend Ray Chester San Agustin Ambida. If you are interested to purchase a copy of this chart, please see the details below. The Sultanate of Maguindanao was an independent Islamic kingdom that ruled parts of the island of Mindanao in the southern part of the Philippines, located in the modern-day province of Maguindanao and parts of Davao City. The current Maguindanao is now a province in the Philippines and is part of the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, or BARM. Since 2014, it had two capitals. The provincial capital is in Buluan, but the provincial legislative branch continues to convene in the old provincial capital in the town of Sultan Kudarat. It borders Lanao del Sur to the north, Cotabato to the east, Sultan Kudarat to the south, and the Illana Bay to the west. Maguindanao has one city and 36 municipalities. Its current governor is Bai Mariam S. Mahuda Datu, who is the first female to be elected governor of Maguindanao. Her husband, Suharto Mangundadatu, is also governor of the neighboring Sultan Kudarat. According to one of its former sultans, Sultan Amir Baraguir, who was a renowned expert on the Maguindanao history, Maguindanao or Mindanao is the youngest Malay Muslim sultanate compared to Sulu and Brunei. It was established at the close of the 15th century or the early part of the 16th. Contemporary historians agree that by 1515, a few years after the fall of Malacca, Maguindanao was on its way to becoming a full-fledged sultanate. It is, however, surmised that as early as the 14th century, Maguindanao was already a port of call by the Chinese. The founder of the Maguindanao Sultanate was Sharif Kabungsuan, who is accepted as the first Sultan of Maguindanao. His father, Sharif Zainal Abidin, came from Hadramaut and was a descendant of Muhammad, God's final messenger. And his mother was Putri Jusul Asikin, who was the daughter of the Sultan of Johor. When Sharif Kabungsuan arrived at Tinundan near the present-day Cotabato City, he converted the natives and spread Islam throughout Maguindanao. Sharif Kabungsuan first married Putri Tunina, the adopted sister of Datus Tabunaway and Mamalu, the rulers of Maguindanao, when the Sharif Kabungsuan arrived there. Unfortunately, Putri Tunina failed to give him a son. They had, however, 3 daughters, one of whom was to marry the founder of the Principality of Buayan, whose later rulers would also adopt the style of sultan. This would mean that the later rulers of Buayan would be descendants of Sharif Kabungsuan as well. He then married an Iranun princess by the name of Angin Tabu, and they begot Saripada Makialang or Makaalang Saripada, who became the second Sultan of Maguindanao and reigned from 1543 until 1574. Saripada Makaalang married Bulim, the daughter of a Blaan chief, thus widening further Maguindanao's sphere of influence to include the Aborigines. Out of this marriage, they had Datu Bangkaya, who would reign as Sultan of Maguindanao from 1574 to 1578. Datu Bangkaya married 3 times, and from these 3 marriages, he had 3 sons who would all rule Maguindanao one after the other. By an Iranun lady, he begot Datu Dimasangkay, the 4th Sultan of Maguindanao, who ruled from 1578 to 1585. By a noble lady from Buayan, he begot Gugu Sarikula or Datu Sarikula, who would become the 5th Sultan of Maguindanao, who would rule from 1585 to 1597. And by a Maguindanaoan lady, he begot Datu Buwisan, who was also called Kapitan Laut during the reign of his elder brothers, who would become the 6th Sultan of Maguindanao and would rule from 1597 to 1619. Sultan Sarikula married the daughter of the Sultan of Sulu, Sultan Muwalil Wasit, while Kapitan Laut Buwisan also married another Sulu princess, Bai Labi. By the time of his death in 1619, Sultan Buwisan had paved the way for a smooth succession of Kachil Kudarat, who proved as worthy as his father. Ruling as the 7th Sultan of Maguindanao for more than half a century, Sultan Dipatuan Muhammad Kudratullah Nasir Uddin, more popularly known as Sultan Kudarat, saw the zenith of Maguindanao's external and internal sovereignty. Sultan Kudarat was known for being a diplomat, a trader, a polyglot, a mystic, a legal authority, an ecumenist, and a gentleman. He married his first cousin, Putri Mampei, who was not just his first cousin on his father's side, but also a cousin on his mother's side through the Sulu royalty connection. The son of Sultan Kudarat, Sultan As-Salehin Saifullah, also known as Sultan Dundang Tidulay, succeeded him as the 8th Sultan, but ruled shortly from 1671 to 78. It was actually his son, Sultan Muhammad al-Muthabat Barahaman Muizuddin al-Dawla, who ruled from 1671 to 1699, who jointly ruled with his father until his father's death, and he was proclaimed the 9th Sultan of Maguindanao. It was at this time that power in the Maguindanao Sultanate was fought by many forces. While Sultan Barahaman ruled, his brother, Kaharuddin Kuda later succeeded him as Sultan and ruled until 1702. After the death of Sultan Kaharuddin, the eldest son of Barahaman, Bayan ul Anwar, succeeded to the throne and ruled from 1702 to 1736. However, his brother, Muhammad Jafar Sadiq Manamir, also proclaimed himself Sultan of Maguindanao, and in between the rule of his older brother Bayan ul Anwar, Jafar Sadiq Manamir was also proclaimed Sultan, and he also ruled in his own territory from 1710 to 1733. Muhammad Tahir Uddin, son of Bayan ul Anwar, was Sultan of Maguindanao from 1733 to 48, as was his cousin, the son of Jafar Sadiq Manamir, Muhammad Kair Uddin, also ruled at the same time as his first cousin Tahir Uddin, but lasted longer until 1755. After the death of Khairuddin, his son Kibad Sarial was proclaimed Sultan of Maguindanao, and he ruled from 1780 to 1805. After his death, his son Kawasa Anwar Uddin became Sultan of Maguindanao and ruled from 1805 to 1830. Kawasa Anwar Uddin was succeeded by a grandson of his younger brother, Rajamuda Alamansa, Kadratula Untong, who ruled from 1830 to 1854. After his death, the throne again passed to the line of Anwar Uddin, this time to his grandson, Muhammad Makakwa, who ruled as Sultan of Maguindanao from 1854 to 1884. Sultan Makakwa was then followed by his son, Muhammad Jalal Uddin Pablo, or known sometimes as Pablo Jalal Uddin, who ruled as Sultan of Maguindanao from 1884 to 1888. The throne was then passed on another line of the family to Mangigin, who ruled as Sultan from 1896. Hindi ako sure. Ayoko. What? Stop. After the death of Sultan Barahaman in 1699, the throne passed on to his brother Kaharuddin Kuda, who was Sultan of Maguindanao from 1699 until 1702. Upon his death, the throne then passed on back to the line of Barahaman to Barahaman's son Bayan ul Anwar, who would rule as Sultan of Maguindanao from 1702 to 1736. However, his brother Muhammad Jafar Sadiq Manamir was also proclaimed Sultan of Maguindanao 8 years after his proclamation, and he would be known as Sultan of Maguindanao as well from 1710 to 1733. Upon their deaths, eldest son of Bayan ul Anwar, Muhammad Tahir Uddin, would succeed as Sultan in 1733 to 1748. However, his first cousin, the son of Muhammad Jafar Sadiq, would also be proclaimed Sultan from 1733, and he would rule until 1755, much longer than his cousin Muhammad Tahir Uddin. Upon his death, his son Kibad Sarial would be proclaimed Sultan of Maguindanao, and he would rule from 1780 to 1805. In between his rule as well, his uncle Pahar Uddin would also be known as a Sultan of Maguindanao, and he would be also known to rule from 1705 until 1805. This was the time when brothers, cousins, and uncles would be fighting for the throne of Maguindanao. After the death of Kibad Sarial and Pahar Uddin, the throne passed on to the legitimate line once again to Kibad Sarial's son, Kawasa Anwar Uddin, who would be Sultan of Maguindanao from 1805 to 1830. Upon his death, however, the throne passed on to his brother's grandson, Kudratullah Untung, who was Sultan of Maguindanao from 1830 to 1854. After Sultan Kudratullah Untung's death in 1854, the throne once again jumped to another line of the royal family, and this time passed on to Muhammad Makakwa, the grandson of the earlier Sultan Kawasa Anwar Uddin. Muhammad Makakwa became Sultan in 1854 and would rule until 1884. Upon his death, he was succeeded by his son, Muhammad Jalaluddin Pablu, who would also be known as Pablu Jalaluddin, who would rule as Sultan from 1884 until 1888. When Muhammad Jalul Uddin Pablu died in 1888, the throne once again jumped to the brother of Sultan Kawasa Anwar, down to the descendant of his brother Mangigin. Sultan Mangigin became Sultan of Maguindanao in 1896 and ruled until 1926. When he died, the throne was passed on to his second cousin, Mastura Kudarat III, who would rule from 1926 until 1938. When Mastura Kudarat died, the throne once again passed on to another line of the family until such time that Sultan Muhammad Ismail Kalug was enthroned as Sultan of Maguindanao from 1928 to 1991. When he died, his son, Sultan Muhammad Baraguir, was enthroned, and he would rule until the year 2000. Sultan Muhammad Baraguir then passed on the throne to his own son, Sultan Sayyid Amir Baraguir, the renowned historian of Maguindanao, and he would rule for just 6 years, from 2000 to 2006, when he was unfortunately gunned down by some unknown assailants. Upon his death, the throne was passed on to a distant relative by the name of Sultan Alborot, who remains until today the Sultan of Maguindanao. As we have seen, the family tree of the Sultans of Maguindanao very much looks like the family tree of the Sultans of Sulu, as we discussed in one of our previous episodes. While the earlier generations followed strictly the father-to-son succession to the throne, later generations would see infighting in the royal house of Maguindanao, where brother would usurp the throne from another brother, or a nephew would take over the throne of an uncle. And that is our discussion on the Sultans of Maguindanao. We hope you learned something new today, and we hope you enjoyed our presentation. Thank you for watching, and we hope to see you again in one of our future videos. And to our Muslim brothers and sisters, Eid Mubarak.